we need to be realistic about what education spending alone can achieve, and not to expect ministers, the department or schools to be able to solve some deep structural social issues which we have to address but aren't the subject of this debate. So secondly, I think we need to look at our overall education budget and how it is weighted across the different areas of a child's life. So according to the House of Commons Library, our higher education spend is £11.6 billion a year. Our early years spend is £1.6 billion a year. So, to me, that seems back to front. When's the best time to invest in a child's life? It's in the early years. It's at the beginning when those foundations are being laid. And as my right honourable friend has said, 40% of the attainment gap that develops between the best and the worst off children develops by the age of 2. I'm not suggesting that we invert those two budgets, but certainly we should think about whether we should be front-loading our educational spend in the early years when it potentially could have more impact. And of course, on the higher education budget, £11.6 billion, I do think we have to ask if that is money being well spent. 50% of our young people now go to university, but after 5 years, 5 years after graduation, 30 to 50% of graduates are in non-graduate jobs. 77% never earn enough to repay their student loans. So I do welcome the recent reforms to make it fairer, higher education spending fairer to the taxpayer and fairer to students. But I do think we need to go further, because this cost to the taxpayer of £11.6 billion, and I think it's actually more when you add in the local authority contributions, only half of our young people are actually seeing the benefit of that enormous taxpayer spending. And I think we should be asking, should we distribute that £11.6 billion or more fairly? So I do welcome the moves to spend more on technical and vocational education, but there's still a fraction of the expenditure on higher education. Imagine if the schools budget was spent on only half the population. That would be a deep inequality. Well, that is what's happening in our higher education budget. Now, many of our universities are phenomenal assets for this country, world-leading assets, they really are. But we have to ask if the massive expansion we've seen in the sector over recent years is helpful either to individuals or to society. And I certainly can't find any evidence of increased social mobility as a result of the massive increase in higher education spending. So I really welcome the direction that this government is moving in terms of raising the priority, raising the status, raising the budget of vocational and technical education. I think it's very important, but we have to go far. If we're really going to level up education and level up the education budget, I think we need to look at distributing the post-18 education spending far more fairly and equitably between academic, technical and vocational routes. I certainly will.